Chapter 8, Mishnah 4. In Mishnah 2, we learned about a dispute between a borrower and a lender, which centered on the question of the cow's status at the time it died. The Mishnah now teaches about a dispute between a buyer and a seller, which arises from a question about the item's status at the time of the transaction. If someone trades a cow for a donkey, and after making the trade it is discovered that the cow had given birth, and we do not know whether it gave birth before the trade took place, in which case the calf belongs to the first owner of the cow, or whether it gave birth after the trade took place, in which case it belongs to the new owner of the cow. And so too, if someone sells his Canaanite slave woman, and after selling her it was discovered that she had given birth, and we do not know whether she gave birth before the sale, in which case the child belongs to her first owner, or whether she gave birth after the sale, in which case the child belongs to the new owner. In both of these cases, this one the seller says she gave birth before I sold her, so the offspring belongs to me. And this one the buyer says she gave birth after I bought her, so the offspring belongs to me. They divide up the value of the calf or child. The Mishnah now teaches about another disagreement between a buyer and seller. In this case, the law depends on the claims of the two people. The Mishnah first presents the case of the dispute and then discusses the law for them. Someone had two slaves, one large and one small, and he sold one of them. But he and the buyer disagree about which slave was sold. And so too, if someone had two fields, one large and one small, and he sold one of them, but he and the buyer disagree about which field he sold, the law in these cases depends on their claims. The Mishnah lists 4 sets of claims, and the law in each case. The first set of claims. If the buyer says, I definitely bought the large slave or field, and the other one, the seller says, I do not know which one I sold you, the buyer has the right to the large one, since the seller would have to swear an oath in this case to free himself from giving the buyer what he claims. He cannot swear since he admits he does not know. He must pay the claim. The second set of claims. If the seller says, I definitely sold you the small slave or field, and the other one, the buyer says, I do not know which one you sold me, the buyer has the right only to the small one. The seller is not obligated to swear in this case because the buyer is not making a definite claim. The third set of claims. If this one, the buyer says, I definitely bought the large slave or field, and this one the seller says, I definitely sold you the small one, the seller must swear that he sold him the small one, and then the buyer receives only the small one. The fourth set of claims. If this one the buyer says, I do not know which one I bought, and this one the seller says, I do not know which one I sold you, they divide the difference in value between the large one and small one. The seller gives the buyer half the extra value, and the buyer loses the other half.